Good morning. I've got a couple of stories to tell you, or things, videos to make about the cold weather that we have. It's probably on everybody's mind in the eastern part of the United States. It's been brutally cold, probably because of the shift in the Arctic or polar vortex, I think they call it. But anyway, here now I heat with uh, just wood. And the house is fairly big. I mean, it's bigger than it ought to be, but we don't heat a lot of it. Uh, and I've often said that because of all the thermal mass of all these bricks and the kakelofen and blocks and cast iron and kitchenware full of water and stuff, uh, I have a lot of thermal mass here, and that helps a lot. And the other night, for example, it went down to I think 3 below, and outside, and in the house, it never got. It stayed at 73 degrees. Uh, that's upstairs. Now down here it's warmer. It's a little bit like a sauna down here sometimes. But anyway, it was I think 2 days ago. Things were a little different. It went down to minus 13 outside, and my son fires at night. I mean, I'll stoke the wood. I do before I go to bed, but I go to bed very early, but I also wake up really early. I'm usually back awake by about midnight or sometimes earlier. But in this case, I don't know, whatever. He didn't fire very hard. At about probably, I don't know when it was that he stopped firing. I was surprised he didn't. Probably because I had the house so warm before that. But I think, as I recall, around 1 o'clock or so, 2 o'clock, I realized that hey, he fired kind of light, and so I put a couple of sticks in the stove. I went back to sleep, but then in the middle of the night, around 3, I realized, the house is getting chilly. Let's see what the temperature is. And that's when I saw that it was 13 below outside. Now, the house usually, because of the thermal mass, it just stays right around, it doesn't go below 70 degrees. And I try to keep it from going above, say, 73, 74. It's real stable. But this day, or that night, the house started to cool down. When I saw it was going down to 67, and it was like, I don't know, 4 in the morning, I thought, oh, I better start doing some firing here. And I looked, and what had happened was the fire was there, it was going, but it was small. And so, why I'm telling you about this is because I ran the furnace through its paces. I started to fire, and I didn't have any trouble starting fire. I mean, the fire was there, it was there, but I brought in a wheelbarrow full of firewood, and I started putting it to it. Now, with the thermal mass, you also can't warm the house up very fast. It doesn't cool down very fast, but it all doesn't warm up very fast. Now the control on that furnace, there's two controls. There's a flap at the bottom, a flap that comes up and goes down. It's called the draft. And then in the door, there's a slide, which is an afterburner to let oxygen over the fire. It comes from the time when you burnt coal. That was pretty important to use back then, because a coal fire needed that oxygen going over the top of it to complete the combustion. But wood isn't like that. It lets the air up through. But anyway, normally we just have everything closed, just close it all down, and the leaks from around the doors and stuff, they're plenty. They feed the fire all it needs. But I opened the draft. At first, we just take a nail and open the draft a little bit and put a nail in there to kind of hang, and that keeps it open about like that much. But you can raise it higher and put the nail up at the hinge, and then it's open. It's basically open. And so I did that, and I kept firing, and I put as much wood in that furnace as I could fit in there. But of course, it doesn't just instantly burn. The furnace itself wasn't really hot. So I did that, and it was taking some time, but I kept watching it because I was really putting the wood to it, and I said, so let's see what happens, you know. Well, I got a pretty good big fire going, but it still wasn't warming up as fast as I wanted. So I thought to myself, well, let's just see what happens. And so I continually kept it full of as much wood as I could get in there. And I opened the afterburner, which is the slide in the door. And that way I was putting as much oxygen to that fire as I could without actually opening the ash clean out door. Sometimes back in the old days with coal, and before I made adjustments, we had to open that door to get the furnace to really go. Well, I didn't do that, but I had it going all it could, and then I kind of watched. And boy, did the furnace perform. But I thought, you know, because I had flame in there, and I thought, well, I better keep an eye on this, and I did. And one of the things I did was I turned all the lights off, and I looked at the furnace carefully to see if there were any red spots, if it was getting, what do you call it? Well, red from the, there's a word that goes with that. Well, like iron gets red when it gets red hot. If there were sections that were red hot, then I would start closing it down right away and see. But they weren't. The whole furnace stayed black. Now in the past, there was a time I remember when we were mixing coal and wood, back before we had very many improvements at all. I remember coming down the steps and seeing that furnace before I turned the light on, and the whole thing was glowing red. I remember too, I have a furnace, I think I might still have it out in the junk pile, that I got at a sale, where you could see that at one point the steel furnace had actually got so hot that it had sagged over. The furnace had started to melt. I think I saved the doors out of it. I'm not sure what I did with that, but it was something to see. So I was aware of what could happen. And it didn't. It performed very well. But it took about 4 hours before I had the house back up to 74, and then I had it up to 75 by the time my wife and son got up. But it was quite a study. I would not normally, you know, and of course, the colder it gets, the better your draft is. I don't know if you'd understand that. With the really cold air outside, it presses down, and you have a lot easier time getting a draft. So, I mean, I really had a draft going through there. Now, something that puzzles me in retrospect, later in the morning then, when I was cleaning the ashes out, there weren't that many ashes. And I thought, why aren't there ashes? I put all that wood to it. And I think what happened was the draft was just so strong that any fly ash, they call it, was being taken right out through the chimney. And I don't know. So it was quite an experiment, and as ever, I'm really proud of that furnace. But it was a study. Bye for now.